I just became fascinated by Einstein unified field theory, which eventually led me into, in my teenager years, into UFOs. And well, wait a minute, these things fly without rockets. They got some secrets going on.
Yes.
Their spacecraft, their spatial bias drive of some time, they're using force fields
Yes.
that for some reason we don't know about. And I figured that's part of the unified field theory. That's the complete picture. It's not even in the original Einstein version. You didn't include anti-gravity in there.
Generation X Paranormal.
Well, everybody, welcome back.
Hey, everyone.
We are Generation X Paranormal. I'm Logan.
And I'm Nicole.
Not sure why I put such a big pause on that, but we are Generation X Paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, guys, welcome back. Seriously, we've got a fun show. It's probably going to be a little bit more science-based than some of the things we've covered in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I think it's going to have some more to do with some paranormal stuff, too.
Yeah. To explain the paranormal
To explain
stuff.
some of the paranormal.
Yes.
But we have Mark Fiorentino on today. And what can you tell us about Mark?
So Mark has been obsessed with Einstein's unified field theory ever since hearing about it when he was a boy. He has studied how the applications of Einstein's theory can be used to travel through space, renewable energy, and future technology. He is the author of his new book, Master of Reality.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk
dig
more.
in.
Yeah, let's dig in. Well, hey, Mark, how you doing?
Fine, thank you. It's good to be here tonight, guys.
Awesome. It's great to have you. Welcome to Generation X Paranormal. Yeah, of course. Well, I know that we know a bit. We've done some research, and we feel like we kind of know you a bit. But for our audience that may not know who you are, can you kind of give us like a 30,000 foot view of kind of like, first of all, what your past, and kind of a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I got into electronics pretty early in my life's career. I did a little thing in media technology, but got out of that and got into electronics. Got a technical degree from Tampa Technical Institute in Florida. Great memories from that place. I learned my true love of electronics and computers. So from there, I got a job at Harris Government Systems working on a killer satellite program, and then moved to North Carolina to work for IBM for most of my career, and started out in production and then moved to quality engineering, and then moved to research development lab. Did a lot of programming and fabrication of automatic test circuitry and such. Won a lot of technical awards at IBM Division Award, Outstanding Innovation Award, various awards for things that I did while I was at IBM.
Awesome.
Spent the last few years in Florida working at ImageSoft, and then I worked locally at IT department here in town in Winter Haven Hospital. And then I retired and wrote the book, and that's where we are right now. The 4 years it took to write the book, and then another 3 or so afterwards, going on shows and continuing my research into gravity and anti-gravity.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Jeez, what do you do in your off time? Do you get any?
Well, I decided I wanted to stay busy. I didn't want to retire and just sit in front of the TV.
Yes.
So I made
Understood.
the conscious choice right on the first day. I says, I'm going to write this book. I got all these ideas. I've had them for many years. I've done a lot of research in unified field theory, studied Einstein and all that. And I said, I might as well write it all up, see what happens. And so I took my time, and the next 4 years I stayed busy writing that book.
For
And I'm
sure.
glad I did. It was a real adventure.
Yeah, we'll definitely kind of tap into that
Yeah.
a little bit here. But kind of starting off that first step. I in our research of kind of the things that you're set you on your course, so to say, being a very very high interest in Albert Einstein. Um,
Yeah.
can you kind of tell us, that's not unusual. I mean, having a little small a science background as I have, I appreciate science and I appreciate Einstein and all the greats, for lack of better words. But what caused you to kind of jump? Because I know, from what I understand, it was a very early age, right?
Yeah, 10 years old. I was going to catechism. I was still living in New Jersey at the time.
Okay.
And they gave us assignment, the kids in the class, to find a saint born on our birthday. There was no internet in 1965.
Right.
Right.
It's not an easy task. I mean, what could you do really to look something like that up? You ask your parents, other people maybe. I eventually went to the calendar and happened to see Einstein's name on my birthday. So I says, huh, we're born on the same birthday. So I went
That's
to
cool.
Encyclopedia
Yeah.
and I read about him, and I read articles about the unified field theory, which he was working on. And I remember to this day very clearly when I was reading that stuff, I said, this is the most interesting stuff I've ever read in my little short life of 10 years.
Right.
And I just became fascinated by Einstein, unified field theory, which eventually led me into, in my teenager years, into UFOs. And well, wait a minute, these things fly without rockets. They got some secrets going on.
Yes.
Their spacecraft, their spatial bias drive of some time, they're using force fields
Yes.
that for some reason we don't know about. And I figured that's part of the unified field theory. That's the complete picture. It's not even in the original Einstein version. He didn't include anti-gravity in there.
Right.
And so through the years, just kept studying, reading about Einstein, reading about Maxwell, and reading about Newton, Faraday, Lorentz, my favorites. And they all had a common belief in a thing called the ether, which then I also studied heavily over the years.
Right.
And that's how I got there, basically. It's just from a fluke thing that's, there's no accidents in life. That happened on purpose.
Yeah.
That got me to where I saw that, and then it triggered something in my mind that got me to be interested and recognize this got something to do with my life path. And so obviously I'm a believer in reincarnation, incarnation, before life, birth and training to come down to this realm and to live and experience an incarnation. And this is part of that. This is part of what I came to do, I believe. And that was no accident, being introduced to Einstein. I firmly believe that. I know for sure that was part of the plan.
Right.
So that's how I got here, and I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad to be a part of this adventure.
Well, we're really glad you're hearing
Yeah.
this too. With Einstein, there are so many different theories. I know he's got at least 4 or 5 that are pretty huge. I know that there's theory of relativity. Trying to remember a couple of the other ones, but I know the one that you've kind of spent a lot of time on is unified field theory, and I know we're going to talk about that pretty in depth. Can you kind of give our audience a little bit of an idea that may not know it, what the theory basically states, and kind of I guess I hate saying it all the time, but like a 30,000 foot flyover of, a major theory?
Of course, it's no problem. It only really takes one sentence.
Oh, okay.
I will add some extra stuff in just for a little more detail. So what he believed in, and what everybody believed in the time before 1905, was that there existed a thing called the ether. And the ether is basically what I would call, and people of that time would call the fundamental field. So the unified field theory is electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So what that means is the single fundamental field, what they believed and what I still believe today was correct, is that it is a quasi-elastic solid. So outer space is a real thing.
Right.
So once you get that in your head, it's a real thing, and it's quasi-elastic solid. Quasi meaning it's, if you stretch it or compress it or twist it, as soon as the force that's doing that removes, it snaps back into a square Euclidean geometry.
Okay.
So that's the quasi part. The elastic means it can be deformed, bent in certain ways, like general relativity talks about. And solid means that which is continuous. It's not made of parts. It's not a quantum field. It's a straight, continuous, fundamental field. So electromagnetism is nothing more than the electrostatic field, which is a twist of space, and the magnetic field. So when the electrostatic charge goes through space, space rotates. That's the magnetic field.
Okay.
Okay.
So somehow, those moving charges moving through space makes gravity. I concluded that has to be true. Einstein didn't know about certain things. I guess before I go on, I should stop because I want to just keep to the definition.
Sure.
So basically, electromagnetism, electrostatic field, magnetic field, and the gravity field are just different bendings of the single fundamental field, which is the ether. That's it.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Now, if I got my my azimuth shot right here, I know that even breaking it down to the physical, like the core of the Earth, as it rotates, there is a discharge of electromagnetic charge. Is that correct?
Well, there's ions in the I don't know if you want to call it a plasma, or where the layers of the molten lava or magma are at, and in between these layers is iron and nickel, and there's that ion layer that's rotating. But in the deepest core that they now discovered in the Earth, there's a solid core. There's something solid there, and I say that in my book as well. The difference is they think it's a metal. I'm saying it's neutronium. And that's a whole nother topic that I cover with 3 chapters in my book. I'll just leave it at that unless you want to know more about what neutronium is and so forth.
More than likely, we'll
spinning
definitely get there.
That's spinning very rapidly. And so you got frame dragging, which is something Einstein proved existed in general relativity. So the other stuff is influenced by this twist of space because of that rapidly rotating solid object, which is heavy, massive.
Right.
And it's twisting and causing that ion field to go, which is then ions moving, charges moving around, makes a magnetic field. And that's where the Earth's magnetic field comes from. So you never have a magnet unless there's a moving charge.
Right.
Always associated with a moving charge.
My astronomy teachers, I was a planetary science minor, and which basically means I remember very little, but they'll be proud that I remembered that much. So, we talked about a little bit, but I need to let our audience know that you've released a book, and we want to kind of start, I guess, tapping into that a little bit. I know there's so much to it, but when you started writing it, did you have a way you wanted to go with that and start kind of, topic wise and how you wanted to encompass everything? And did your research change, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, the research did change due to certain events and circumstances that I was guided to add a chapter on stargates, which I was not wanting to do because I don't really know that much. So I had to research the Stargate phenomena. I only knew certain things had to be true when I started that chapter, but that came at the very last part of the book. You write an outline, or I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that. Those were the chapters, right? So then I would pick that and start it off, and then I knew I had to order them in a way that makes sense, leading up to the discovery of the cause of gravity, which is one of my research papers, and I include that in the math in the book. So to talk about the cause of gravity, you got to go back in time, study the ether, explain the Michelson-Morley experiment, explain Lorentz transformations, special relativity. Eventually you get to the cause of gravitational field, which is basically accelerated fundamental unbalanced charges move in this fashion.
Okay, yeah.
Right here. Let's turn it on. And let me point it in the right direction. There we go.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's
cool.
what's happening inside of the neutron and the proton. The three quarks are moving in this pattern. And it's rolling and spinning, which winds up being a sphere, a rapidly spinning, precessing sphere.
Gotcha.
And that's what's the cause of gravity, and that's what my paper involves. And I got the idea from Einstein and his discovery of something another physicist came up with, Ehrenfest, who basically explained the idea for me to go search for. It's very complicated in a way, because I went to search for the dynamical geometry that Einstein was looking for. I said he was looking for something that was going to cause some sort of convolution of space. So I went looking for it, and I got the idea also from Einstein. He said, I want to know how God created this world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomena, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. I said, that's a good idea. If you want to know how something works, go to the creator of that something and ask him.
Absolutely.
So I knew normally the only way to do that is to die.
Right.
And that had to be out. The next best thing was to go and find a near-death person who saw a geometry in while they were having their NDE, which is very rare. Because I read through dozens and dozens and dozens, and I read books, and I went to the websites, and finally, after a couple of weeks of searching, I found a lady that saw a geometry. She called it the pattern. And I said to myself, if it's right, it will be composed of three parts, representing the three quarks. She saw this, the pattern, which is three parts. Perfect. And then God tells her, I am the energy that forms mass. So the motion of those particles is the energy. The way they move causes the phenomena we call mass, which is something that emits a gravitational field. Everything fit right. Everything was perfect. I contacted her, worked with that group, she had a famous mathematician working for her, and I tried to convince them that's what this represented. And I wasn't able to do that, but they were nice, and we worked together for a while. But I went off on my own because I said, I need to look for the formula that explains this. And if you're not going to help, then I'm going to do it. Sure. It's going to get done, and it did get done. And
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's how the whole gravity thing started. That's part of what was the main focus of the book. But then there was, other things. I talked about the Michelson-Morley experiment, what went wrong there, that caused all of physics to go off course from the year 1905 on. Oddly enough, or ironically, it was partly Einstein who took him that way. But it's a big story. It's in the book. It explains why he did what he did to save his theory and cause people to not believe in the ether anymore. And but still, he always based his math. Special relativity was based on ether theory. Lorentz transformations were based on ether theory. Maxwell's equations were based on ether theory. Come on. Obviously, there's something going on here. All these guys are getting the right answers using ether theory. Why would we want to abandon it because one experiment failed to detect it? So anyway,
Wow.
there's other things. Project Sunshade is in the book, how to cool the Earth down. But we need anti-gravity technology to do that. We need anti-gravity drones to bring the structure into outer space at a cost-effective way and use a shading system to block enough of the sunlight, 2%. That's all we got to do. Drop it by 2%. We'll drop, our temperature will go down 1 degree centigrade, and that'll be enough to put us back in the 1940s. We'll have cold winters again. And it'll be nice. It'll rebuild the glaciers. But that doesn't happen unless anti-gravity happens.
Yeah, Mark, on that. Yeah, can you kind of unpack the anti-gravity part? Kind of, obviously, a lot of listeners and watchers are going to know what gravity is. I mean, if you don't know that, there's other issues. But kind of, I guess, a recap on anti-gravity and the properties.
Yeah, well, if, as Einstein said and concluded, that special relativity, the boundary of this contracted as it's fun, is a contraction of space. So that if you picture a point mass or whatever, the arrows of force, the gravitational force, are all pointing inward toward it. From all, there's no pole. It's in all directions. It's a contraction. So that space literally is pulled. It's an elastic, so it's pulled toward it, and it condenses as it contracts around that point. That's the gravitational field. So anti-gravity would have to be not a contraction of space, an expansion. So we have to find a mechanism, a way for that to happen using particles like electrons or photons or something. And so I set about the task of going back through the history of anti-gravity research, listening to people like Bob Lazar, which I think he's a little flaky, but he did make a few good points that he either knows somebody that knows about the anti-gravity technology or he really did work at Area 51. But setting him aside, because he's not a reliable witness, Thomas Townsend Brown, T.T. Brown, did some amazing work, and in my opinion, is really truly the first discoverer of anti-gravity. Maybe Tesla was before him. I haven't read where Tesla really talked about anti-gravity that much, and until I see some documents or read somebody that knows about that more. It wouldn't surprise me if Tesla knew it too, but anti-gravity is an expansion of space. So in my research now, I had to find the cause of gravity, which I showed you early. I had to find the cause of anti-gravity, which I now know is coming from dipoles. What are dipoles? Dipoles, positive pole, negative pole. North pole, south pole. Two poles of opposite charge, magnetic or electrostatic. These things actually emit a very, very weak linear gravitational field system. And in other words, in the North Pole, it's got a slightly attractive force, but it's linear. It's going into the magnet. It's going into the charge. And as it gets to the middle, it then goes out of the charge and becomes anti-gravity. So then I set up experiments to detect that using magnets. And I did detect it. I have hundreds of measurements where if you put the magnet facing north, or the North Pole up, it weighs less when you turn it on. It literally gets lighter. Now, does that take, tricky doing to measure that? Yeah. You got to be able to measure to 1,000th of a gram. And so I bought a nice expensive scale, and I rigged it up, but you can't put the magnet too close to the scale because the magnetic field will react with the circuitry and react with the plate and actually pull down and become heavier than it is.
Right.
So you have to raise it way above with a non-magnetic material. I use Legos. It's a marketing scheme. It's going to pay off in the future for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll see.
I
And,
hope so for sure.
Hundreds of measurements, and the magnet weighs less when the power's on. Now, what's interesting is what happens when you flip the power around and the South Pole's up and the North Pole's down. What do you think happens?
Well, if it goes in as gravity and comes out as anti-gravity, would it be anti both ways?
Yeah, the anti-gravity is on the top part, and
Right.
the attractive part is on the bottom now, right?
Right.
So you would think it would become heavier
Okay.
than normal.
Right.
In other words, instead of getting a negative number, loss of weight, it would get a positive number because
Is that
it's
similar to when you take
down.
Right. Is that at all similar when you take two magnets and flip it upside down, where you get like that?
They push.
Yeah, they
each
push
other
against
away.
each other, and you get kind of like a
That's
hover.
that's the magnetic field that causes that attraction and repulsion.
Okay.
This experiment is taking that out of the equation.
Okay.
We don't want that effect causing the magnet to go up and down. So I have to do
Gotcha.
various types of measurements, like flipping it and seeing what happens. So
Okay.
you would think normally a person would say, "Oh, well, I bet you it gets heavier."
Sure. Now that makes sense. Yeah.
And you know what happened?
It got lighter, I'm sure.
It did,
Yeah.
but not as light as the other way.
Huh.
Really?
And that's exactly what Thomas Townsend Brown found for the electrostatic capacitors. When the North Pole, the positive pole was up, there was more thrust. It was going up. When he switched it, there was still anti-gravity there, so it was still lighter, but not as much because the thrusting mechanism, it's going this way, is now pointing down. So he argued for years that that was a true anti-gravity effect. Now, I've seen the same exact thing with the magnets. So the dipole theory is looking really good. Dipoles create this anti-gravity effect. And all you have to do is increase the power to the magnet or the capacitor, and that thrusting and that weight loss becomes more and more until that thing levitates.
Wow.
It's just that simple. But our government has been expert at steering people away from that idea. They did it with Thomas Townsend Brown, and they'll probably try to do it with this. But I'm doing a lot of experiments. And so I'm dissecting this. I'm preparing a presentation. It'll be like a court trial. I'm going to weave a web of truth and evidence around this that nobody's going to be able to undo. I intend to prove it for sure.
That's awesome.
When I get done, everybody's going to know how to make an anti-gravity craft. It's really quite simple. Powerful magnets or powerful capacitors with high voltage. Either you need to use high voltage or high magnets. Magnets is tougher because it takes a lot of current. Maybe megawatts to
Jeez.
make a UFO that's strong enough to levitate and fly at greater than light speed. But the electrostatic one, that's very doable. Much lower power, higher
Okay.
energy. It's all about the energy in the field.
Right.
Magnetic field has energy in it. So does the electrostatic field. We could easily create, and that's why I say Tesla, odds are he did notice something. Because he worked with very high voltages. And that's what you need in order to see the effect. So that's how anti-gravity works. That's the mechanism. I've just described the mechanism that actually causes space to come apart. Because what happens is when you create this dipole, you have the lines of force. If you looked at magnet pictures where they show the lines coming out, going around, that's real. The only problem is when I discovered this and I looked at it, the lines of force are going in the wrong direction. I says, they got the lines coming out of the North Pole. That shouldn't be. That can't be right. I'm confused now. So I had to stop what I was doing, hit the books, and determine how did you come up with the lines of force, the directions. It's important here. So I went all the way back to Benjamin Franklin. He's the first one to guess the current flow direction. He thought electricity came from the positive pole and went to the negative pole. He guessed wrong. So for the next 150 years, everybody based their knowledge and computing the lines of force and directions based on the current flow going in the wrong direction. So that made the lines of force incorrect, which now makes my theory work, because in my theory the lines of force are going in at the North Pole and coming out at the South Pole. And that makes the theory work. So I fixed the mistake that our physicist friends, one amongst many things they did wrong, and got this theory working and on the ground. So it made sense. So I knew immediately they screwed up and had to go back through the history books and pin them down on this. If you reverse the direction, do the lines of force change? And finally I got them to me. Well, yeah, we thought about changing it, but it was a convention, and we said, well, it doesn't really matter. We just pick something.
Yeah.
Everybody's using it, and it doesn't really affect anything. So what's the big deal? The big deal is now, the new theory is you need to have the lines of force going in the right direction so you can tell which side is attractive and which side is repulsive. So that fully and completely explains how anti-gravity works, and it's not that complicated. It's just we were continually being steered away from that idea by the government, planning physicists to say things about Thomas Townsend Brown and his theory, and it's really ion wind that's causing his lift and this, because he was making demos and they were working, and they had to explain why this thing was levitating somehow without letting people on board with the idea that it's actually anti-gravity, which it really was.
So here's what I got to ask you, Mark. Let's say you get your Atticus Finch moment, right? And nobody knows who Atticus Finch is a great character in Cape Fear. But, right? Was it Cape Fear? No, it was, what am I thinking?
Cape Fear.
Yeah, I was thinking of something else. To Kill a Mockingbird. Thank you.
Way off.
Yeah, I don't. Well, it still was
Way-
Gregory Peck, though, wasn't it?
Look that up.
Yeah, but that's an actor. That's not.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, yes, To Kill a Mockingbird. But let's say you get your moment. You're there. You have effectively probably proven how UFOs work, per se. At least one of the going theories. Because anybody who, well, I shouldn't say anybody. A lot of people who are experiencers often say these things moved at great speed and made zero noise, right? So if you have that and it's sitting, it's like a loaded gun. You've got that magic bullet now that proves so many different forms of being able to have propulsion without sound and without thrust. Is it your intent to, because I know what the government's going to do if that's truly, discovered, they're going to want to keep that from, normal folks like ourselves, because if I get something like that, I'm going to launch us into the sky. I know us, but what do you think will be the outcome of solving that sort of thing?
Well, on many shows like this, and I'll say this here as well, U.S. Air Force, if you are listening and you want me to stop talking about it, just send a couple colonels or captains or whatever here. We'll have a talk, and if I have to stop, I'll stop. I know what the alternative is, and that's, death by your hands. Obviously, that's going to stop me. So we don't need to go that far. You don't want me, you want to keep this secret, you're hurting yourselves and you're hurting all humanity, because we need this technology. So I'm hoping that they're just going to let me go, because I earned this fair and square. I didn't leak this from a government group that I was working with, and I figured it all out on my own, just like any regular physicist would do. Even though I'm not a physicist, I just managed to work it out. And I'm hoping that we're getting close to a disclosure time. And if I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume that they want me to keep talking about this, or they don't mind. So until that day comes when they let me know to stop, I'll keep talking. So there's the announcement. You've heard me say it again. If you want me to stop, just come by and let me know. I'm a reasonable man. Otherwise, I'm going to continue my research, I'm going to continue my work, and I'm going to complete the unified field theory. Because once I've rolled in these two new aspects, which is gravity 2, which is coming out of the north of the positive pole. It's a linear type of gravity, longitudinal wave, and anti-gravity, which is also linear, coming out of the other pole. Once I've added those two aspects, electrostatic field, the magnetic field, anti-gravity, gravity 2, gravity 1, all of those merge and are aspects of the single fundamental field. The unified field theory, as I've redefined it, will now be complete. I will have all of the equations, which I'm working on now. Don't stop me now, because I'm very close to getting the magneto-gravitic formulas, and it's soon after that I will have the electrogravitic, because again, there's a pattern in the formulas. When you see the pattern, you know how to do the math.
For sure.
It's just a matter. I write the programs, I write the simulators, I test it, I run it, I get the right results, I know it's working. Like I just released a paper for the cause of particle motion, which is a thing I call the slip wave. It's the same mechanism. It's a dipole. The photon, the particle of light, is a dipole. And so it uses the same mechanism that aliens use to build anti-gravity crafts. So the slip wave, we must model our warp drive field after the photon. Because what moves faster than the particle of photon? Nothing. It's the fastest, most efficient moving object in the universe. So like the Wright brothers studied the birds, and Da Vinci studied the birds to make crafts, flying crafts. I studied the photon particle, so that, and I'm sure that our buddies in outer space, they're millions of years ahead of us, did the same thing eons ago to figure out how to build an interstellar spacecraft. Because not only can you go up to the speed of light, using the slip wave technology, you can break the light speed barrier. Because you pull space apart when you're inside of the slip wave. That gravity and anti-gravity field are actually a rotation and are causing space to expand within that space, which drops permittivity and permeability, which then allows an increase for the speed of light. And everything is in place now to explain and develop a starship. We have the knowledge. If you put all my papers together, read them all and understand them, you have everything you need to build a warp drive.
Nice. Okay, so I got to ask, Kirk or Picard? Which one are you? Are you a Kirk guy or are you a Picard guy?
No, I'm neither one. I'm remember the episode where they found the guy on the planet by himself who invented the warp drive? What was his name?
Oh yeah. Hold on. I've got this. Yeah, Geordie LaForge was talking to him. Oh gosh, it was in First Contact, wasn't it?
Right, that's the guy.
Okay. That guy was fun. He actually he had a little bit of fun, at the local pub, but he liked rock and roll and he would have a good time.
Yeah.
That was good stuff.
Hey, when I do my experiments, I play 80s music.
Nice.
I love it.
We're Generation X, so Right there with you. Okay, so you've got a starship, and we're going warp speed now. If we have that kind of technical capability, and obviously you're saying that is something that we should be able to do here in short order.
Oh, we've already done it.
Right, and that's always the thing I've thought too.
Yeah.
I think that we've
Figured it out.
right, whether it's been government or not, with with things like the warp, not warp speed. I'm thinking of in Skinwalker Ranch. What am I thinking? The porthole,
The portal?
yeah, the portal,
Not the porthole.
the porthole. That's a ship, by the way. But the portal of them
The
moving
portal.
back and forth. I have a feeling that we've been able to at least get our hands or wrapped our head around that particular type of technology. But with that in mind, do you think that, because obviously that would have a profound effect on everything. Military would not be the same. People would not be the same. To know that we have the kind of, Star Trek capability to go from, here to wherever, there is no end to destination, and there's not a real need for propulsion, so you don't have to worry about gas or anything like that. Do you foresee in the future that humanity will not just, I don't necessarily say leave the Earth, but humanity will sort of go to other places and expand through the universe?
I would. The first thing I'd do is build drones and send them off. You'd have to devise a system where the drone knows where it is in deep space, some sort of star chart thing. And, that's computer stuff that can be done, written programs, get the positions, calculate everything out versus the speed. So it knows how to get home again. Can't really use radio wave signals because they're way too slow.
Right.
So if you go 4.2 years, let's say we go to Proxima Centauri, 4.2 light years away, and we want to send a control signal to come home. Well, it's sitting there waiting. It's going to wait 4.2 years before if it could even get it that far away, and then start, come home within 15, 20 minutes. But 4.2 years waiting, you can't use remote control for that stuff. It's got to be all built into the system so that it can navigate there, take its pictures, measure the atmosphere, come back. So the first thing I would do is send out loads of drones to the nearest 1,000 planets, and they're plotting them every day now. They've discovered thousands of planets. So you go to all the nearby ones and you find one that's got an atmosphere similar to us, and that's where you send your first mission to. That's how I do it. I mean, I gotta believe they've done this.
Yeah, I do too, honestly.
And it's a shame they're keeping it secret from us. But I've noticed certain little things like the Mars rovers. You look at the pictures and it takes a picture of itself every once in a while, and after a while it gets all dusty and dirty, and I say, there's all those dust storms on Mars, and all of a sudden a year or so later it's perfectly clean. Well, how did that happen? There's no rain there. How did the Mars rovers, the solar cells, get cleaned?
That's a
I
good
think somebody
point.
went there and cleaned. How did the Mars rover get fixed so many times? Broke down, went dead, suddenly a month later it's working again. I think we got our guys going over there,
That's a
replacing
good
parts,
point.
doing stuff, cleaning it.
Right. I mean, that.
Yeah, I would have never picked that up.
No.
That's a really good point.
Well, if we're able to do that kind of non-propulsion travel, theoretically, they could be there and back by the end of day,
With a slipwave spatial bias drive, you can get to Mars easily under 15 minutes.
Right. Wow.
If you're going at or near the speed of light or just slightly behind, it doesn't take long to get there.
Right.
That's the whole point. That's what the application that's has such great utility is that it's useful in real time, so that we can, all these distances can now be traversed in a matter of minutes instead of years, months, years, or whatever. It was by design that this was able to happen. To me, this smacks of intelligent design.
Right.
Because if you can't do this, you're stuck on that planet until the end of that planet or the end of your race. There's no hope for ever going and exploring other parts of the universe. There has to be a way to do that. And it has to have been built in by the designer right off the get-go. He says, when you advance to a certain level, you're going to discover this technology. And by the way, the creator is helping each race do that through guardian spirits, whatever you want to call them, the spirit guides, whatever. People are sent down with the job to do this at this time when you're ready. And then we get to go to other worlds. Although I would imagine that our brothers and sisters in the universe are not all that anxious for us to visit.
Yeah.
Because what are we going to do?
Oh.
We're going to say, manifest destiny.
Yeah.
We're taking it whether you want or not. And, by the way, we got 10 nukes on board. Either I don't blame the aliens not wanting us to have this technology either.
Yeah, I would venture to say that the moment we have this technology, first of all, I think first contact is done. They're going to come and kind of like with that particular movie that we talked about, they're going to show up and go, okay, now you guys have graduated into a much bigger part of the pie. And if you're going to go into being able to traverse the universe this way, then these are the guidelines. And if you don't, we're going to have a really, really bad day here on this planet. That's my opinion. That's what I think would happen.
I think that we're throttled. We're probably not allowed to leave the solar system.
Sure.
But I don't know that for sure. If I were them, that's what I would make some sort of treaty and say, all right, you got the technology, but you better not use it to come visit us.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't trust you. And they shouldn't.
No.
We're the most dangerous group out there. Not them.
No.
We are.
So far, we've only proven that.
Yeah.
Let's hope it changes at some point. You know, you mentioned spirit guides and things like that. What is your, being a man of a lot of scientific background, what's your belief structure with that and how it pertains to what you studied?
Okay. Repeat that again. There was a part I missed.
Yeah. So you spoke a little bit about spirit guides and the creator and things like that. I guess what I'm asking is what is your belief structure? And if that's too far into the personal part, let me know. But and kind of how it impacts. I'm often really interested in folks who are very scientific minded and kind of the correlation with belief systems and spirituality. What is, if you don't mind sharing, what's yours and how does that impact or I guess enhance your scientific part of you?
Well, I am a person who believes in intelligent design. There's no doubt in my mind that's the way it is. So many near-death people have come back and described God telling them. Like Father Rick Wendell, who's on my site, there's a video. He talks to God and God tells him all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident, is intentioned by God. And I use those words in my book in certain situations, that this was created through the power of intention. That's how this whole universe gets started. And there's so many books on that topic out there from people that have supposedly talked to aliens and mediums that have talked to angels and guardian angels on the other side. And they basically all are saying the exact same thing when it comes to this. You not only created the earth, but the entire universe. And oh, by the way, there's other universes and other dimensions. He created all those too. And God is an infinitely powerful, infinitely intelligent being who is capable of, let's say, there's this one near-death guy who said, when I was there, I was able to see every grain of sand on every planet, everywhere, and I knew its purpose, and I knew its composition and its position. I knew everything about every grain of sand, everywhere in the universe. And God works the same way. All the grains of sand, all the atoms, all the people, all the plants, everything are at the center of God's attention all the time. There is nothing unknown. So I'm a universalist in a way, and I believe there's a philosophy, I want to say pantheism, but I'm not quite sure that that's right, that basically is a belief that God is in everything, everywhere. So now I think that means God exists in and is the same as things, animals. Yeah, so I guess pantheist is right. I don't believe in many gods, but
Sure.
Right.
the one God is really, in fact, all the gods. And there's cases, and what I mean by that is there's a near-death experience where 3 men were hit by lightning, and they all died at the same time. And one was a Christian, one was a Muslim, and one was a Hindu. They all went up the tunnel together. They had their near-death experience. They talked to the light. And each one, as they looked at the other guy, could see, I'm seeing a Christian version of God. This guy is seeing like Krishna or something, and this guy is seeing the Well of Souls. They're all looking at each other and saying, you're seeing it looking that way, and I'm seeing it looking that. So God is presenting himself as any way that you're comfortable with from your previous incarnation, so that you don't get freaked out. So these 3 guys were revived. They all came back and said the exact same story. So that confirms that they had a real valid near-death experience, and nobody else has ever done that where they've shared and have the same story to tell. So God is universal. If you talk to the aliens, I'm sure they're aware of God, and they look at him as universal. But the one difference that I have from Einstein didn't believe in a personal God. I know for sure there is a personal God. And that, in other words, he cares about you and me and everybody else, everywhere. And that's the big difference between Einstein. I mean, Einstein believed in a God. He just believed he created the universe and then just went off and did something else.
Right.
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 And he's
yeah.
not bothered by all the personal people
Yeah.
and our problems. And they hear every prayer everywhere throughout the universe. And that's just the way it is. That's the bigger picture.
For
And
sure,
the
yeah.
sooner we learn that and know it for sure, the faster we will evolve and the happier we will be. It's just a matter of getting everybody on board, especially the scientists, because they
Yeah.
think they know
Yeah.
what's true and what's real, and they're clueless. They're worse than people that are around 150 years ago. I mean, they're primitive in their thinking with this, we believe in the scientific method. Well, that's good up to a point.
Right.
But we're going beyond that point. We're going to the very foundation of reality, and the scientific method is not enough.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I can't really think of any better way to put a capstone on it
That's a
than
good
that.
good ending.
That's amazing. You know, our audience obviously is going to more than likely want to have a chance to reach out to you, and obviously there's the book, and there are other ways of reaching out to you. Can you kind of give them an idea where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm at www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com, and I have links, buttons on the front page where you can go directly to Amazon and buy the book, or you could go to my page. If you live in the United States, you can get a signed copy from my website, and I'll mail it to you. There's links to 2 out of my 3 papers there on ResearchGate. There's a blog and my YouTube page. Please go and subscribe to my YouTube page. I'm trying to get that thing going.
All right.
It's a lot tougher than people give it
Yeah.
credit for. But yeah, we'll
I'll make sure and put the links to your book and all those sites, on our Facebook whenever this comes out,
Right.
So that
Yeah.
they can find you.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, Mark, it's been great. Thank you for sitting down with us, kind of giving us. I know there's so much more out there, and folks, if you're listening, if you're watching, excuse me, I'm choked up about it. Please go out and pick up Mark's book,
Yeah.
and let's go out there, go out to his YouTube page, give him your undivided attention. Stuff's fantastic. So, but Mark, thank you so much for
Yeah,
sitting
thank
down
you.
with us.
Thanks. You're welcome. I appreciate you guys having me on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely.
absolutely.
We'll see you soon.
Okay.
That was a lot of information.
Lots of information.
Yeah. And honestly, I hope for Mark's sakes, he is found right, because he would be a very, very popular man.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, to solve things like that, anti-gravity and all these sort of things. I mean, it sounds very, very
Scientific.
right. Science fiction too.
Well,
you know?
yeah.
Of course, the callbacks to Star Trek, I had to throw those in there. I mean, I'm a nerd. It is what it is.
Yes, we all know.
I lean into it. But guys, tell us what you think. I mean, did you enjoy that? Again, it's a little bit different than what we normally do, a little bit more science involved in that. But I think in order to understand the paranormal, I think you also have to understand a bit of the science behind it.
Well, we've had multiple guests tell us that everything is science-based.
Absolutely.
To be able to explain the paranormal, you have to know science,
That's right.
which in my case, that's tough. It's not great at science.
Every time we say science, I keep thinking of God, name escapes me in Breaking Bad. Jesse Pinkman.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Science, and you know what follows.
Yep. For if you know, you know. But other than that, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.